Hey, in this video we'll be talking about shaders some more, and we're going to be exploring a fragment shader and some of the built-in variables and functions in this CG programming language. So we left off with goal material, trying to make this goal look a little different using an unlit shader. So I had gotten it to the point where it's yellow. That's cool. Let me take a look at that shader. So I had changed just this part of it where we are creating a color variable and assigning into it just a flat color. So this means that every time this shader runs, for every fragment, every pixel of this object, it is going to return yellow. So 1 in the red channel, 1 in the green channel, 0 in the blue channel. So for normal purposes, 1 is the highest value that you can put into these different colors and expect that to have an effect, and 0 is the lowest. So if I put 0 for all 3 of these, I'd get black, and then I can mix the colors by doing values between 0 and 1 for each of those channels. Now I can also sample a texture in order to get color information from an image data. So that's how this shader used to work. Let's see, text2d. So text2d is the function that I need to call in order to sample a texture, and it needs to know which texture to sample. And we have a variable up here that's built in, came included with this shader, main text, which refers to the primary texture that's going to be associated with this material. So sampler 2D, this type just means it's a two-dimensional texture that we can get texture data from. So we pass in main text, and then we have to say which coordinates we want to access this texture at. We get to put any coordinates we want, but these are UV coordinates. They range generally from 0 to 1 if you're talking in the U or the X coordinate, also sometimes referred to as the S coordinate. For some reason it has a lot of names. That's the from 0 to 1 is 0 on the left hand side of the image and 1 on the right hand side. And then for the V coordinate, or the Y vertical or T coordinate, that's 0 to 1 vertically. So I'm going to just get the UV information that's passed into the fragment shader. So this is interpolated from the vertices that you specify. When you're drawing this geometry, each vertex has a UV coordinate, and then each fragment, each pixel between those vertices is just getting some value between the UVs of this vertex and the UVs of this other vertex. So it automatically figures out a decent value for you. So I is the input V2F structure, and it has a UV vector here. This is a two-dimensional vector, so it has X and Y coordinates, and so I can just sample the texture using these coordinates. Let's go to Unity. And you can see my texture show up there now. Let me go back to the texture, or the material. Alright, so this is the main text variable, or value that is getting it from. I can select any of these things. I'm actually going to choose this checkerboard one that's built in, because this is kind of more like what I want my goal to look like. Alright, so a cool thing you can do here is recognize that text2D returns a color. It gives us a 4-dimensional value, red, green, blue, and alpha, and we can treat it just like any other color. We can even modulate that color. So by that I mean multiply by some value. we could modulate it by 0.5, and that'll make everything darker. If you had 1 in a color channel, like something was bright red, it would become halfway down to black, so a darker red. And this, multiplying by just a scalar here, is going to apply to every channel all at once. If we want to apply to individual channels, we can say create a color value. So here's a float 4, and I can specify maybe I want to do half in the red, half in the green, keep the blue the same, so multiplying by 1 isn't going to change it at all, and keep my alpha the same. Alright, so it tints it blue. I could make it a little more interesting. Let me think. I could try to make the darker part blue and the lighter part still whitish. So let me instead try to take away. I'm going to invert this whole color and see what that does. So now that I've inverted it, those all of the zeros that were black became 1s, 1 minus 0. And so it sort of just like flipped the colors. Blue turned into yellow. But if I still want to control this and make it blue, I can invert my what I tried to do here for blue. Take away the blue and keep the yellow. There we go. So now I've got a little different. I've got the lighter blue here and the darker blue there. So that's kind of cool. Now, probably more exciting is trying to figure out some animation in this shader, making things change. So Unity provides this value, a variable, time, and if you put 1 in square brackets, you'll get the time in seconds. So this continually increases, and you can use this time to animate things, to make things change. And what I'm going to use with this time for is to adjust my texture coordinates to make the texture seem to scroll. So let me make a float 2, I'll call this UV, and I'm going to get these UV coordinates from i.uv, and then I'm going to add a little bit. So I can specify another float 2, and I'll put time in there. Let's see, time times 0.2, time times 0.3, make them a little different so they change at different rates, and then use this UV to sample the texture. So now my UVs are going to keep changing every frame, changing over time, and that's what I'm going to be sampling. There we go. That's cool. Pretty nice. So because of the tiling properties of the texture that I'm using, it is just continually cycling through this texture. If I use my smiley face there, you can see that. And I think I want to go just one step further, and this will lead us into the next video. So if I take this texture, this color value, I want to see the places in this texture that are dark enough become completely colored, and the places that are light enough become completely white. And so there's a built-in function. Let's see, this is going to be a color. Okay. And I'm going to use a function called step. So step takes 2 arguments. One is going to be the value that I'm comparing, and the other one the value I'm comparing it to. So if I do a color value in here, this is going to be some gray value from that checkerboard pattern. The light ones are going to be close to 0, and the dark ones are going to be close to 0. The light ones are going to be close to 1, and this step function is comparing that to 0.75. If it's less than 0.75, then step returns 0, exactly 0. And if it's greater than 0.75, then step will return 1. And so this will make it much more chunky and less smooth. There. So very hard edged colors instead of the smooth colors from my texture. And you can see how that looks on other textures as well. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I can adjust the tiling in the editor here. Here's compressed tiling in that direction. But this is really just a factor of my UV coordinates. I could do that in my shader myself. So I could do 2 times my UVs if I wanted to make it smaller, twice as small. If I want to make it really small, 4 times my UVs. That looks like a pretty cool goal. Alright, and I'll leave it there. I'll see you in the next video for more shader magic.